Because Ezekiel 25 tells us Edom is from Teman to Dedan. These are biblical cities that are in Arabia.
Hello everyone, Bible believers around the world. In today's episode, I'm going to be covering some other sources about the Edomites, very similar to some sources that I brought out early on in this series. But before we get there, I want to cover some things that don't make sense about this Esau is the white man doctrine. Now we're going to start off with number one. If the Caucasian is Esau, why have the Islamic and Hamite peoples treated Caucasians as unwanted newcomers to Africa and the so-called Middle East, when the Edomites lived among them for thousands of years, and even was friends with many of the Hamite and Shemite nations, as seen in Psalms 83. Now, the Edomites, as seen in Psalms 83, were confederate with a lot of these Middle Eastern and Hamite nations. And one thing about the Edomites is they had a very good relationship with Hamites. Esau married two Canaanites who would be classified as African nowadays. And also, Hadad the Edomite fled into Egypt and married into the Egyptian family. He married another Hamite. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, if we go down to number two, if whites are Edomites, why is there so much bitterness between the native Hamites of Africa towards the Caucasians who moved from Europe to different parts of Africa, when it's seen in the scriptures that Ham and Esau liked each other and often welcomed each other into their lands and even intermarried multiple times throughout the scriptures? Now, I already mentioned the Canaanite women and Hadad the Edomite, fleeing into Egypt and living in Africa for quite some time. Now, this is a very good point as well, because it doesn't make any sense why both of these points. It makes no sense why the different Arab populations, as well as the different Hamite populations, would be saying stuff like, go home, go back to Europe, you're not wanted here, and all of the hate and bitterness if white people were Esau. Because not only is Esau confederate and has been teammates with these nations for thousands of years, but Esau is not new to the Middle East. So if Esau was the white man, it would make absolutely no sense for all these Arabs and all these Hamites to be, calling the white man, new and that he's an invader and he doesn't belong, when Esau is a Hebrew who's been there for thousands of years. Now, one thing that's also very interesting that's been happening in recent history is there's been a lot of bitterness and violence between whites, Europeans who've migrated to Africa in the past couple hundred years, and the native Hamite populations. There was a thing a couple years ago where Hamites were running white people off and taking their land, and their farms and stuff in Africa. And when you line that up with the scriptures, it just doesn't hold water, because Ham and Esau have been living together and coexisting together for thousands of years. So this thing of white people being treated like they're new to Africa if they were Esau doesn't hold water. Now we're going to get down to point number three, which is a huge point. Now, many link the Aboriginals as scattered Israelites, but when you read old books, it's clear that these Aboriginals didn't even know what a Caucasian was until somewhat recent times. So why would these Israelites not recognize their own brother, Esau? So this is something super crazy as well. I'm going to read that book in this video, but one thing that's very interesting is, like I've put on the screen, many people link the Aborigines of Australia as being scattered Israelites. But when white people first started showing up to Australia, they were surprised and didn't really know how to react, and they reacted in kind of a funny way, we're going to find out, because they didn't even know what a white person was. And I'm going to bring this up as well. There's videos on the internet of Europeans visiting remote places in Africa, and these Africans have never seen a white person before. They think he's a ghost. So if the white man is Esau, and Esau is native to the Middle East and spent a long time in Africa, why are the native populations of these countries treating him like he's new? The Chinese are not confused by white people because they've been, neighbors with white people for thousands of years. And stuff like that. So, but when you have these African populations, you have these Middle Eastern populations, these modern day, Canaanites and, Philistines and all of them, they're like, who in the world are these white people? Because you see that white people aren't from the Middle East and they're not from Africa. They're not Esau. But I really find it super crazy about the Aboriginals, because why would Israel not recognize their own twin brother Esau? And there's other sources of blacks interacting with whites for the very first time, other than just the Aboriginals, and it was also, the reaction was confusion. Now, I remember hearing a guy about a year ago mention a book, and it was a book about the slavery time period, and it was about some blacks who were, on the slave ships, and they had never seen a white person before. They were confused. They had never seen, things like blonde hair and fair skin and blue eyes and stuff. They didn't know, what was going on. So when you line all this stuff up together and you put all this together, it really puts a huge hole in the Esau's the white man doctrine. We'll just go over it. We have everything from the Arabs and the Hamites, not treating white people as foreigners who don't belong, when that doesn't make sense, because Esau, owns land in the Middle East. He spent time with Africa. He married into Hamite families, been there, for a very long time. And then you have, too, about the bitterness that Hamites have and how they've been trying to push white people, out of Africa and back to Europe, for hundreds of years. And then we have, verse 3 about the Aboriginals. And, a lot of the Aboriginals, did not like white people neither. And they wanted to get rid of white people, which if you look at it, if the white man is Esau, why are they trying to kick their brother out, and why do they not recognize their brother? Okay, now we're at that source I was just talking about. Livingston says that when he entered certain villages of Central Africa for the first time, the women and the children, and even the dogs and hens, would run away as if the devil himself were at their heels. It was their first sight of a white man, and the effect, he said, was precisely as if a mummy in the British Museum were to come to life. Now, when you read the scriptures with all of the dealings of Edomites and Hamites, this doesn't make any sense on why, if Esau was the white man, that Hamites would be surprised by white people. We have Hadad, the Edomite, living in Africa for a long time, marrying Hamites there. We have Esau himself, marrying Canaanite women, Africans. Then we also have Psalms 83, where the Edomites were teaming up with Hamites to help destroy Israel. And then we just have the simple fact that the Edomites and the Hamites were very close neighbors. You had Canaanites dwelling in Arabia at the time, and then you also had across the Red Sea, you had Egypt and Africa right there. So the Edomites were already close by. I mean, Ham and Esau was basically the equivalent of North and South Korea today. They were neighbors. So the idea that Ham would not know about Esau's existence doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't hold water when you test it with the scriptures or just basic geography. Now, here's the part about the Aboriginals. Other white travelers have reported similar of the South Sea and the Australian blacks. Lady Diana Cooper says that a Negro woman in Timbuktu laughed at her because of her white skin. So this person thought that white skin was funny. Similar experiences in the South Sea and Australian blacks. So going off of the Australians being scattered, the Australian Aborigines being scattered Israelites, why do they not recognize white people? Why are they like, hey, you're Esau, you're my brother, welcome back, brother, or I hate you, brother, or any of that type of stuff? It's, who are these people? That's something that doesn't hold water and doesn't make any sense. Now, the part about the woman thinking, the Negro woman thinking that her white skin is funny, that's kind of interesting. But, it just plays into the fact that white people were not dwelling among these people. And then when you look into the scriptures, white people spent very little time, in these areas. You had the Greek invasion in the book of Maccabees. They were there for a bit, and then you don't really see white people there again until the New Testament and the Roman period. So for the most part, white people weren't even there, and their existence was not known, and that explains these reactions. Now, one thing that I'm going to cover right now is DNA. Now, a lot of people will be like, oh, DNA is a lie, DNA testing is false. But I know a lot of Israelites, do DNA testing, and they'll be like, oh, I'm 2% Spanish. That's my Moorish captivity, my scattered Moor DNA and all that type of stuff. Or Portugal, that's my Moor Sephardic Jew blood and that type of stuff. So we're going to cover the DNA. So Esau is the twin brother of Jacob. So we would be seeing a match between white people and black people if the white people are Edomites. But when you look into the haplogroup that the so-called African American is a part of, which a haplogroup is a DNA ancestral road that tracks people back, for hundreds upon hundreds of years, white people and black people aren't a match. As you can see, what they call African Americans, which is this, black Israelite, we got L1C, L1B, L0A, U6, L2A, L2B, L2C. Most of the blacks are of the L series or the U series. But when you look at white people, they are in a completely different haplogroup of ancestral lineage. Just like you look at the Asians and they're in a completely different thing as well. So, you could tie that up with the, Moab. Wouldn't there be a link because of Ruth the Moabitess if the Moabites are the Koreans? So why is there no DNA? There's no DNA proof to say that us and white people are related dating back to Isaac. Now, when you look at all these other nations and stuff that lived far off, the only connection that we have with these people from a DNA standpoint is the fact that we both come from Noah. We are both one of the sons of Noah. That's the only connection we have with them. We don't have any twin brother connections. Okay, so I'm going to pull this out. This is very similar to what we read early on in this series about Herod Antipas and his swarthy complexion. So I was recently digging through old documents, and I found this article in an old newspaper document from, I think it was 1933. And from what I understand about this document, it's talking about some type of circus or, carnival-like act that people do, at the circus, they do all those type of acts. And it talks about that there were men from Arabia who were taking part in doing their own acts. And I found it very interesting and something stood out to me. Here's what it says. 9 swarthy skinned sons of Esau from sunny Arabia. So right here we have Edomites again being identified as swarthy. Once again, just like Herod Antipas, except this is more in modern times, even more modern. Herod Antipas was, New Testament time period. So that was already new. But this is even newer. This is, 20th century time period. So seeing Esau being referred to as being swarthy again is something that caught my eye and I wanted to cover in this series.